Thank you and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Today our topic is Indigenous knowledge and local identity. So thank you for joining us for this one. It's our fourth webinar on the series, and we are so excited to talk about this. At our previous webinar, there was quite some interest. We already could see the connection between collections and Indigenous knowledge. And today we're just going to see a bit more of that in-depth explanations and connection. So welcome, and today we have two guests. Both of them are from Sanbi, and we're so glad to have them. I'm going to give a brief description or introduction just before each of their talk, but we have Natasha Lombard and Lisiva Papo, as I said, both from Sanbi. Please keep in touch with us on our social media platforms. Those are our handles on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, as well as on our website. We also have a new page on LinkedIn, so please do go and like it and follow us. Just before we get started, we just need to go through some guidelines of engagement, just so that everyone knows how to treat each other and behave as we are here. So we ask that you keep your contributions helpful and considerate of everyone, both us as your hosts as well as other participants. So whatever you share, whatever you say, please be kind and consider those that are receiving. Use the chat box to say hello. Please, you can do this now. Just greet each other and just let us know who is here and where you are coming from. So your organization, your school, your university, whatever is the case, you can do this now on the chat. I see Ariel, Prince Lou has gotten us started, and Charmaine. It's good to see you guys, Maxine. It's good to see you with us. Thank you so much. And you can use the Q&A box to add your questions. So as we go through the webinar, I'm sure you'll have some questions that will arise. When you have those, please use the Q&A box, put them there. They'll be safe there, and we'll be able to access them and view them, because if you put your questions in the chat box, we might lose them.
So as she was saying, please do, if you have questions for the panelists, please do put them in the Q&A box so that we don't lose them. And then we might not be able to answer all your questions during the live webinar, but you are welcome to post more questions on our YouTube channel and are live on Facebook, where we do have this video as well.
These are showcases or publications that we have published that are linked to these webinars. So we start with a publication, the showcase, and then we follow that up by a webinar. So information that is shared in this webinar, if you prefer the written form, you can go and get these showcases on our website. If you go to nscf.org.za, you go to the resources page and the resources tab, and then you will access the Value of Natural Science collections page. From there, you will find them from the first one up to the last one, which was on Indigenous knowledge and local identity. Now we can get started with our presentations. So our guests are ready, and they are ready to give us that information that we are here for. Now we will start with Lisiva Papo. Lisiva is from Sanbi, and he's going to talk to us about herbaria as custodians of knowledge and culture. Lesiva is the Chief Auxiliary Services Officer at Sanbi. He focuses on curation of bryophytes and lichens. He has been doing this work for 3 years, and part of his work involves interacting with clients on plant identification services, which he always looks forward to, as it's an opportunity to share and gain knowledge on plant use. He enjoys a colorful morning from seeing various shades of lichens. And I'm sure Sanbi, being in a botanical garden, he sees a lot of that each and every day. So Lesiva is very lucky. Lesiva, are you ready for us?
Morning, everyone. I am Lesiva from Sanbi, and I'm going to present on Indigenous knowledge and local identity. So I just laid down a Cyprus deformis reed mat. It's a reed mat that we may all sit and we may enjoy this Indigenous knowledge and the beauty that the knowledge brings. And also going to look at also the herbarium and collections and how they contribute to Indigenous knowledge, and also on the local identity. By definition, Indigenous knowledge is a network of understanding, beliefs, and traditions to keep, talk, contextualize Indigenous relationships with tradition and landscape over the years. This knowledge has a holistic approach to life. It maps relationships amongst human beings with flora, fauna, land, water, and also supernatural forces. The knowledge respects the man-to-nature relationship, and it is aware that an imbalance can have a major consequences. Next. So this knowledge, it encompasses aspects of agriculture, crafting, housemaking, and etc. It is passed from generation to generation through experiential learning. In experiential learning, it comes in the form of practical demonstration, storytelling, metaphors, songs, and also dances. In this knowledge system, women play a major role in societies when it comes to transmission of knowledge. So from what I learned from my grandmother is that she taught me how to sow maize seeds. So with that, she showed me that what you first do, like you put your hands inside the bucket, and then you fill your hand with buckets. And the way that you throw the seeds onto the field is first you go like at 30 degrees, you go in a 30 degrees angle, you release the seeds, you go again in a 90 and also in a 120. And then you take some few steps forward, and then you throw others to the back so that you cover up all the spaces. When you have done that, the result is that you will have evenly distributed maize plants along the field. So what that does is that it gives you enough space so that whenever there's time to weed or to take out the weeds, it becomes easy, and that also the maize crops do not compete amongst each other. So they become evenly distributed. So we're also going to look at the herbarium and also collections, the importance towards Indigenous knowledge. So for those of you who are not aware of the herbarium, it is a library of giant plant specimens collected from broad geographical ranges through many years. Herbaria play an important role in that they house collection used in research, teaching, and also public outreach. Collected plant specimens may include both vascular and non-vascular plant specimens, as you can see at the bottom, at the two first pictures at the bottom of the slide. These collections are the foundation of plant diversity and also evolution. Next. They provide data and act as reference materials used in agriculture, forensics, land management, human health, which are beneficial to the society. And importantly, they provide wealth of information on natural heritage dating back many years ago. Regarding indigenous knowledge, collections can be used to reference the type of plants used as food, shelter, medicinal purposes for both humans and animals. And collections, again, they form data to track and trace the sustainable use of plants. Specimens provided with general information on the locality and also collectors' information. However, some specimens, depending on the collector, may provide further details on the use of plants and also common names. Such common names include Mufatsamaru and also Tola. So Mufatamaru is the plant in the picture. So the burning of this Mufatamaru is believed to disperse the gathering clouds and thus preventing rain in the Sotho culture. In the Beni culture, we have a proverb that says, Sebone tola borele diteng ga yona go ya baba. Tola is solanum supinam. And that phrase simply says that do not charmed by the smoothness of the fruit, for its content is bitter. In English, it simply says that all that glitters isn't gold. So it's a way to warn people, or to warn people within the community that do not be charmed by beautiful things or things that look enticing to eyes, but they can be dangerous. We also have an aspect of local identity. Local identity can be defined as that it provides distinctive features to small-scale places, including both positive and negative presence of people. It comprises of the physical, social, historic, and also aesthetic aspects of an area. By studying collection and their distribution patterns, historical records in terms of plants preferred for food and medicinal purposes can be traced. An example is the distribution of Zemenia. Zemenia is an indigenous fruit, but you can see that it is distributed in Gauteng, Limpopo, Northwest, and also in KwaZulu-Natal. So it is not found around the Western Cape. So most likely, then we can see that the type of food that we preferred in this area compared to the ones that were preferred in other places of the country, such as Western Cape and other places. And thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisiva. That was so interesting. It's interesting how you could put so much information in such a small talk. I'm trying to even identify just one thing that I found really interesting. But the one thing that comes to mind is how you learned from your grandmother how to distribute those maize seeds. I find it interesting because I've never heard of it, interestingly. Back at home, I'm from Venda. We just dig holes and put the seeds individually. But it takes so much time and effort.
Yeah, like the way you're seeing it was gonna take forever. But the way I was taught, like it becomes so easy. And also the result that came after, that you see this evenly distribution, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a wealth of indigenous knowledge that we have, especially as a country and a continent. I'm always amazed by just how smart and intelligent our forefathers were when you look at the way they used to do things. So we must be appreciative of the herbaria that are keeping all this knowledge in our herbaria. So thank you so much, Lisiva.
Okay, thank you for inviting me as well.
Right, I hope you guys found this as interesting as much as I did. It's always so interesting to hear how people used to live before we were on Earth. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We'll now move on to Natasha. Natasha Lombard is also from Sanbi, and she's also situated at the National Herbarium in Sanbi. She's going to speak to us about the Theseum, so some lesser known traditional uses of Theseum. If you don't know what Theseum is, Natasha is going to explain it to all of us, and we will leave this webinar having some good knowledge, some basic knowledge about it and why it's important. Natasha is a researcher in plant taxonomy at Sanbi. So she describes, classifies, and names plants. Her research focuses on the parasitic plant genus Theseum. She also curates the iris and orchid herbarium collections at the National Herbarium in Pretoria, and identifies plants of these groups submitted to the herbarium for identification. She has been appointed as a scientist at Sanbi for just over 2 years now, But prior to that, she was volunteering and she worked part-time in several herbaria while completing her studies in plant taxonomy. She most enjoys discovering, describing, and documenting species that are new to science and spending time in the field amongst the plants. So she enjoys her time with the plants. I wonder what she hears from them. But let's hear from Natasha.
Thank you so much, Fulu, for the introduction. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today and to be able to contribute to the Indigenous knowledge in this beautiful country of ours. I do hear things from the plants, as you suggested. If you listen closely, you might find some interesting things, as hopefully you will see in my talk today. So I first came to study plants of this genus when I was doing a 1-year NRF internship at the National Herbarium in Pretoria. And this was in 2016. My supervisor at the time, Dr. Marianne Leroux, was the curator of these plants of Theseum. And she assigned me a small research project on their taxonomy. Little did I know at the time that I would go on to do a master's degree and a PhD studying Theseum. Although my field of expertise is actually plant taxonomy, one does get curious about other aspects of the plants that you work with. So for one of the chapters of my PhD thesis, I actually did a review on the uses of Theseum. And in the beginning, it seemed that very little was known on what these plants were used for. But as I searched deeper into the literature and into the collections, I found many interesting bits of information. So most people are not familiar with these plants. I thought I would just give some examples of what they look like. You can see there's quite a bit of variation. And these plants are actually very, very common in South Africa, both in the number of species, but also just in the number of plants. The chances are good if you step out of your car on the side of the road that you will step on one of these plants. When we look for them in the field, this is how we find them most of the time. So they are actually very, very common. This genus is actually quite large, with about 350 species occurring across the whole world. But we have the majority of the species in South Africa, about 170 of the 350 species. Just quickly how you will recognize these plants. Here you can see some of their characters. But what is quite interesting is that they are root hemiparasites. So this means that they parasitize on the roots of other plants. If you look in the left-hand corner here, you can see this dark brown root is the host root. So this is the plant that the Theseum parasitizes on. And this light brown root is the Theseum root. So the Theseum root grows this extension that wraps around the host root. We call this a storium. And this is where the exchange of nutrients happens. And these plants can also photosynthesize for themselves. So they're actually quite well adapted for survival. Perhaps that is why they are so abundant. They also have these absolutely tiny, tiny, tiny flowers. And I think this is often why they are overlooked. If you look in the left-hand corner here, you'll see there's a thumb with a thumbnail. And those yellow structures are the tiny little flowers. So the flowers of this genus are never more than about 6 millimeters long. But if you look closely, you will see that they're actually quite beautiful. And one of my favorite species, Theseum pubescens, has these beautiful flower lobes with these long hairs on the inside. So as I mentioned, my colleagues and I did do a study on both the traditional and the contemporary uses of this genus. We did write a scientific publication about it, but I think, yeah, I will just highlight some of the more interesting aspects of what we found. We actually found that plants that are utilized are restricted to Africa and to Asia. So in green, we have the number of species used compared to the number of species present in black. So these are in the old world countries that these plants are used. In the Western world, they are not utilized at all. We also found that they primarily used as medicines, and interestingly also as food. So both as food and as beverages. Also, they have some charm and craft uses, and these are restricted to Africa. And they're used to treat an amazing amount of different ailments, 137 different ailments, most of which are related to the reproductive and the respiratory structures. And these are quite a big words I've listed here on the right-hand side, but the takeaway message here is just that these plants have several very useful functions when it comes to their medicinal properties, and these have been proven in laboratories. Some of the more interesting uses that I came across, I'll just give a few examples of species in South Africa that occur in South Africa. With some of the medicinal plants, Theseum angulosum, with the Sesotho names here, is actually used for digestive ailments such as heartburn and apparently also internal tumors. And then Theseum costatum, which is this absolutely tiny little plant, is used for respiratory related ailments such as asthma and chest colds. And this is quite popular under the Sotho people. Then a very interesting charm use that I came across is Theseum pallidum, and it's actually used as a love charm. So they make a decoction of the root, which you can see here, and then it's used as a body wash or a purgative or a steam treatment, and it is said to make you more attractive to the opposite sex. I have yet to try it, but there it is if you do need it. Then the other example is Theseum utile, that's used as a broom. You can see here the shape of the plant lends itself well to being used as a broom. And seeing as this showcase is about Indigenous knowledge and the value of our collections, as Lesiba gave us, told us in his introduction, I thought I would give a few examples of the information that we actually found from herbarium specimens. The first one is Theseum uncium, and on the label here it says there was an ethnobotanical study. Ethnobotanical study means it is plants used by animals, by people, plants used by people. And this was done at the East London Museum. So it says that this plant is used to treat worms in both animals and in humans. And then it also gives the local name, which I'm not going to try to pronounce, but like Lesiba said, oftentimes those names are recorded also on the specimen labels. And then Theseum fastigiatum, which is actually a plant from Tanzania that's used by the Safwa people, and they use it to restore color to the children's hair by putting it into water and then washing the hair with it. And it's known as this Inyala. It's the local name that's also recorded on this specimen label. And another example from Tanzania is Theseum stumanii, also used by the Sakwa people. They actually chew on the roots of the plant that you can see here, and they use it to attract customers to their shops by chewing on these roots. So these three examples, these three specimens give examples of information that, as far as we could see, have not been recorded in any sort of literature, not in books or reports or anywhere else. So if it were not for the specimen labels, this information would have been lost. And now we have included it in our publication, thereby ensuring that this indigenous knowledge is preserved. And then there's a very interesting story about Theseum species being used as teas that I'm actually borrowing from one of my colleagues, Prof. Ben Erach van Wyk from the University of Johannesburg. When looking at these plants at first, the first thing that I think is not to use them as a tea. It's not the first thing that comes to mind. So it was quite interesting to find that actually they make a very nice tasting tea. So actually what happened was Prof. van Wyk and his colleagues found some historical tea samples from 1930. And that was in the Clan William Museum. It was actually a salesman's case with, I think it was 23 samples of different teas. And then looking at the chemistry, and also by talking to the local people in the Wuppertal area and the Cape, they managed to identify these plants. So the three species used is Theseum spicatum. You can see the plant here, Lekistea, and this is the tea that's actually said to be superior to rooibos tea in taste. And then Theseum carinatum, known as jakkalstea. Jakkalstea refers to skelm soos 'n jakkals in Afrikaans. In English, it translates to sly as a fox. This sort of insinuates that this tea is used as an adulterant in other teas. And then Theseum strictum, which is very common across the Cape, and the local names of this plant indicate that it's used as a purgative for tuberculosis. So very interesting. If you would like to read more on this, I do have the references for the literature at the end of the presentation. And then while going through the collections at the National Herbarium, I found many interesting bits of information. For instance, Theseum species that are eaten by animals. And this is not recorded anywhere in the literature. This information is only present on the specimen labels. For instance, Theseum strictum is eaten by sheep and goats. Theseum utile, the flowers are eaten by birds, such as this one here. Then also Theseum gallivoides, also eaten by sheep. And this tiny plant, Theseum costatum, is eaten by eland. So this is all very interesting. And then I also came across a problematic Theseum species, because we've now seen that many of them are useful, but they can also be problems as they are parasitic. This Theseum archetissimum is apparently a big problem that it kills fodder. So fodder is used as feed for animals. So this label says that it is killing the napier fodder, which you can see in this photo here. And then there's another label stating that the same plant completely kills this Serradella fodder, which you can see in this picture. So it's good to keep in mind that there can also be an agricultural aspect to the information that we find in our collections. And then this species, Theseum phenole, is a troublesome weed on the lawns in Hermanus. So they can also be problematic. Yeah, so I've given some examples of the uses. Just in summary, I think that our collections are so important in preserving our Indigenous knowledge and our local identity, in terms of, not just in terms of the specimen labels, but also in the fact that the labels are always accompanied by a specimen of the plant in question or of the animal. So we can always go back and verify the identity of that specimen compared to the information. Yeah, thank you everyone for listening and for the opportunity to be here. And if you would like to read more, here are the references. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. It's always so interesting to see the work that's being done in our institutions. So I should have just introduced what the NSCF is in the beginning, but we're a network of institutions that are holding natural science collections. So it's herbaria as well as museums. So herbaria are holding collections of plants, all kinds of plants. So when you see a building, you don't really realize the work that's being done inside that building. So it's always interesting to hear all that. And Natasha's presentation just shows us just how much work has been done and is being done. So thank you so much, Natasha. I just love the different examples that we are being given.